Oh, no, I'm fine. Don't worry about it. Here, you get I don't want to sit in front of it.
Okay, good morning, everyone. Good morning. My name is Matthew Holstein. I'm a staff attorney here at Chicago Volunteer Legal Services, and I'm very excited and honored to welcome Governor Pritzker to our office this morning to sign the Consumer Protection Act. This is a bill that is going to help Illinois consumers by doing two different things. The first is lowering the interest that is charged on consumer judgments, and also shortening the amount of time during which those judgments can be collected. The bill is passed through a huge array of people behind me, and I'm very, very grateful for all of their input. We're going to be hearing a little bit more about the bill later, but for now, please welcome Governor Pritzker.
Thank you. Thanks very much to Matt, and especially for all the hard work that you put in here. I want to thank the Chicago Volunteer Legal Services organization for hosting us here today. The advocacy of your team, honestly, as well as so many others across the city of Chicago and the state of Illinois, was fundamental to getting this bill passed in Springfield. And I especially want to recognize the bipartisan commitment of Representative Guzzardi, Representative Ma, Representative Skillicorn, Assistant Majority Leader Martinez, in co-sponsoring this legislation. Have I skipped any legislators that are here? Did I miss anybody? All right, but there are so many others in Springfield who played a part in this, and I don't want to forget them either. Your work on this is an important reason that many families in Illinois will have the chance to establish greater financial stability. Thank you. Thank you to all of you, to the organizations and to the elected officials for your leadership. And I especially want to say to former Majority Leader Barbara Flynn Curry, who joins us today. Over your 4 decades in public service, you moved Illinois forward in more ways than most of us could count. And I am really glad that you've joined us today for this important signing. You have fought for consumers for your whole career, and having you join us even after you've served in the General Assembly is an honor for all of us. So thank you very much, Barbara. I want to give you a big round of applause. In a few moments, I'll sign into law the Consumer Fairness Act, which will help countless families who are paying an outsized price for their past financial mistakes. Under this new law, families will now pay a lower post-judgment interest rate for sums of $25,000 or less. And we're reducing the time frame in which the collection of a debt judgment can be revived. Specifically, the post-judgment interest rate on these consumer debts drops to 5% from 9%. And the window of opportunity for a debt collector to cash in on a judgment shrinks from 26 years to 17 years. These are numbers that are in line with or better than the rates in other states. They are numbers that face no opposition from Illinois debt collectors and other financial institutions. From 9% to 5%, from 26 years to 17 years. These are good numbers, but more than numbers, they represent the lives of real people. They are elderly people, free from drowning in debt from past decades. They are families, able to begin building financial stability for their kids, no longer trapped in a vicious cycle of debt. They are young adults, getting a glimpse of a future where they aren't burdened under a mountain of student loans. Consumer debt is at an all-time high across the United States, and there are millions of people, including too many Illinois families, who are struggling under unconscionable circumstances. Today, here in Illinois, we are giving real relief to those who are simply trying to pay off their liabilities so that they can end the cycle of debt that they are trapped in. When I campaigned for governor, I made a promise. We will rebuild Illinois and stand up for working families. The Consumer Fairness Act helps fulfill on that promise. To everyone in this room, thank you for your partnership and for helping to bring Illinois into the 21st century. And now it's my great pleasure to introduce one of the chief sponsors of this bill, someone that I have grown to admire and who has become a leader in Springfield, Representative Will Guzzardi.
Good morning. My name is Will Guzzardi. I'm state representative from the 39th District, and I was the House sponsor of House Bill 88. I am so proud to be here with this incredible group of people who has worked for so many years on issues of consumer fairness and making our state a better place for Illinois families. I have to reiterate what the governor said and extend a tremendous debt of gratitude to Leader Curry, who's with us today. I first got involved in this issue a couple of years ago, and it was at the very end of Leader Curry's long and illustrious tenure in the House. And she, in my view, got this bill to the 1-yard line, and it was just my job to get it over the goal line. She did tremendous work on this issue and has just been a role model for me and for everyone I know in the legislature. So one more round of applause for Leader Curry, please. There are so many people to thank, many of whom are here. The various organizations who work with people who are struggling with consumer debt every single day, many of whom are represented on stage here. Our colleagues in the legislature, the many who have fought on this issue and on other adjacent issues in consumer debt and consumer finance for so many years. It's a big coalition, as you can see, and it took a big coalition to advance this important issue today. Families coping with consumer debt are struggling in a number of ways in our state, right? Typically, the folks who are dealing with these challenges are working low-wage jobs or living on a fixed income. Often they're struggling to pay rising rents or rising property taxes. They're struggling to pay higher medical bills and the cost of their prescriptions. These are folks, like many Americans, who are living essentially paycheck to paycheck, who don't have money in the bank for a big expense. And so when some sort of difficult situation arises in their lives, they are forced to go into debt to try to pay off the car loan or the medical bill. And these families, like so many across our state, do what they can to get by. But unfortunately, that balancing act can be impossible for some people. The rent, the bills, the light, the prescriptions, the debt. And families fall behind. And as a result, some families face these kinds of debt judgments and are forced to repay that debt. But the thing we must remember is that those who are seeking to repay their debt are working hard to do it. These aren't people who are trying to shirk their obligations. These aren't scofflaws. These are hardworking Illinoisans who want to pay back what they owe. But unfortunately, too often they are trapped under a burden of debt and interest that they cannot escape. A 9% interest rate collected year over year for decades, as permitted right now by state law. And that burden is simply inescapable, especially at a time of such low interest rates right now that families simply aren't able to catch up to 9% interest year after year. And we'll hear many stories. You could certainly spend a lot of time talking to people who have been affected by this issue. We'll hear stories today about it. But what we seek to do today is to break that cycle, to give families a path back to stability, back to getting square, to paying what they owe, and to getting back on their feet. So once the governor signs this bill, we will be entering into a new era in which people who owe debts are responsible for getting them paid, but don't get trapped under this burden of long periods of excessively high interest rates. It's a very important measure. I'm very proud to have been a part of it. I'm very grateful to everyone here and to everyone who's not here with us, but who has fought over the many years to make this a reality. And I'd like to turn it over to my state senator, my dear colleague, a leader on this issue and so many others, Senator Iris Martinez.
Thank you. As a senator, it's always great to have a state rep that really cares about what's going on, and it made it easy for us over in the Senate to be able to pass this bill because all the hard work was done over in the House, but it only happens sometimes, okay? Sometimes, okay? But let me just say that, you know, again, as someone who has been in the community a lifetime, we've seen so many families fall behind because of debt, and I think that this bill goes a long way to relieve relieve our families from that kind of a debt. We're not saying that we want you to get rid of the debt. What we're saying is they want to be able to pay the debt within a certain time, and the interest rates that have been charged in the past are ridiculous, and that really shows that families will never, ever to be able to pull themselves out of poverty when they have these kind of debts, part of their lives. So I'm very grateful to my state rep and to all the different organizations that came together over the last couple of years to make sure that this bill was consumer friendly, but also fair. And I'm very grateful that my state rep took a lead on this and really brought people together to ensure that we're doing the most fairest thing that we can do for consumer, but the right thing to do for families that have fallen behind. And we have to make sure we lift them out of poverty. And this is a way to do that. So, Governor, thank you so much for your vision on this. The governor's office helped us a lot with this, and thank you very much, Governor, because for the first time, I'm going to get a bill signed by a governor, and I didn't get one the last 4 years, so I'm very excited about this. So thank you, Governor. Thank you, the organizations involved. Thank you.
Hi, good morning, everyone. I'm Avni Kamdar of the Chicago Legal Clinic. Just a few months ago, a disabled woman reached out to my colleague, Caroline Simon of the Chicago Legal Clinic, to request representation. A default judgment had been entered against her in 1996 for an unpaid car loan. The creditor had waited for almost 20 years to revive the judgment, and it wasn't until 2019 that they tried again to collect, and by freezing her bank account and blocking access to necessary funds. So what had been a judgment of $4,000 had now almost tripled to over $11,000 due to the statutory interest rate. The client wrote, "I've worked to pay my bills, make a home for my 2 children, and send them to college. I've tried all my life to do what is right. If I'd ever received anything, I would have contacted someone to try and make a payment plan. I don't even remember the car." These are the kinds of stories that our coalition of legal advocates see every day. It is, though we strive to, through our limited resources, to protect our clients from debilitating debt, it is legislation like the Consumer Fairness Act being signed today that brings tremendous relief to consumers in Illinois who are attempting to build financial security. Often, abusive debt collection practices target the working poor, people of color, the disabled, and the elderly who are without equal access to representation in court. Thank you to the Creditors Bar, Senator Martinez, Representative Guzzardi, and Governor Pritzker for standing with consumers today. Although more needs to be done to create a fair playing field between consumers and the lending and collection industry, today is a step in the right direction. Thank you.
Okay, gather around, everybody.
Excited? Oh my God! What's wrong with your other bills? I don't know. The past 4 years. Anticipation.
Still starstruck.
Can you send me that, please? Yeah. All right.
Thank you. We're happy to take any questions of sponsors, of course, or me, from any members of the press. We'll start with anything about this legislation that we just signed into law. If there are any questions about it.
You know if there's estimates about how much Illinoisans currently owe in total? Is there a way to calculate that?
We'll get you the answer to that question. May not be standing behind me here unless there's somebody who's ready to answer that. I defer to my leader. Any other questions about the bill? Great. Happy to answer any other questions you may have.
So on the, I'm sure you've seen some of the news articles on federal investigators looking at some of the people close to Speaker Madigan. I'm wondering if you still have confidence in his ability to lead the Democratic Party and be able to speak.
Well, as I've said before, I think we need to see this process play itself out. It's hard to tell. I know what you know, what I've read in the newspaper, so we're going to have to see where this leads to.
Have you been contacted at all?
I have not.
That doesn't really answer the question. Do you still have confidence in something that?
Well, again, we're moving forward. Allegations are just that, and so we'll see. I haven't actually seen what those allegations might be. I mean, I think at this point, there are a number of people have been contacted. We've read the stories that you all have put out, but it's hard to tell what it's really all about.
Have you changed your thoughts on the Trump impeachment?
No, and I want to make sure I clarify for you. I have said from 2 years ago, more than 2 years ago, that I believe that we should impeach President Trump. That impeachment process I wanted to see begin in early 2017 based on the information that was available even then, because it takes an investigation to actually come up with the facts so that a decision could be made. Not to lead to a specific conclusion, but to get the facts out there, an investigation would need to have proceeded. Nothing happened, as you know, from that moment to, I don't know, around, I'm not sure how many months it took finally for the beginning of an investigation. So here we are 2+ years later. The only question I would raise is I think he should be out of office as soon as humanly possible. So the only question to me is that going to happen with an impeachment process, or is that going to happen with an election? Any Democrat at this point would be better than, I mean, I will just say I'm not taking sides in the Democratic primary. I don't have a candidate. It'll be interesting to watch the debates. I've watched the ones up to now. I can only say that this country will be in better hands with a Democrat in the White House.
How are you thinking about this primary? I mean, it's such a big field. How are you thinking personally about who the best person would be? Without naming, if you're not going to name names,
Look, I have a lot of criteria that I apply when I think about, who would be best to run the country. My number one criteria as governor of the state of Illinois is what's best for the people of the state. And who's going to protect the interests of the United States, who's going to protect the interests of working families. It's what I ran for office to do. We are not getting that out of the White House now. We are not getting that out of the Republican Party, in my view. And so I think it's just very important that we switch the party that's in control of the White House in order to change the direction of the country so that it works in favor of the people who need the United States government most, and works in favor of the people of the state of Illinois.
Have you met with many of the candidates running privately? Have you sat down with them? Which one?
A few. I've known some of them even before they were running for public office. I happen to have been at the National Governors Association. Everybody there's running. No, not me. But I think the chairman of the National Governors Association, or the one who just stepped out of that role, Steve Bullock, who's a governor from Montana. I've gotten to know him as a result of his role there, and I met him before. So I've gotten to know a few of these folks, and I think they're all terrific people. They're I think fighting for the values that there's a very common strain among all of them. There may be some infighting on one issue or another, but there's a common strain, which is we need to lift the burden on average families, on working families across the United States, and unfortunately, Donald Trump has flipped the script on working families and instead worked for a very few at the top and not in the interests of average families and people who need it most.
And then one more. His comments on Baltimore. He's often talked about Chicago, but what about what he said about Baltimore? Where do you stand on that?
It's terrible, and it's especially terrible because the context of it really wasn't about Baltimore, as you know. He was attacking Elijah Cummings. He was attacking a revered and respected African-American congressman, chairman, someone who just that day, or perhaps the day before, I'm not sure, I have my hours correct here about when he tweeted, the president tweeted, but just the day before, Elijah Cummings had been, in a hearing, vocally, asking serious questions of a nominee the White House had put forward, questions that needed to be asked. They were tough questions. And the reaction by the White House is to attack the person who's asking the questions, who's doing his job. And that is unfortunately what the White House has been all about. It's what Trump has been all about, just attack the people who are simply trying to do their jobs. Now, what's especially disturbing and upsetting and something that I just find reprehensible is that it appears that Donald Trump only seems to be choosing people of color to attack. People of color who are in positions of power or who have the ability to affect change. And he wants to denigrate them. He calls them names. He calls them terrible names. You know that I led the building of a Holocaust museum. And the words that get used that come out of the White House are words that I just find reprehensible. They're words that we've heard before in history. They're words that shouldn't be coming out of a president of the United States. Free speech exists in this country, but the president of the United States should be better than that. And this one, he deserves to be thrown out of office, and he does not represent most of the country.
Thank you. Governor Pritzker, it's been about a month since you and Mayor Lightfoot were asked at CTA headquarters about the state helping the city with some of its pension issues. Has there been any progress in that conversation, and is there a chance we'll see legislation maybe in the fall to address either the city's pensions or consolidation of the downstate police and fire pension system?
I want you to realize I'm thwarting my press secretary in answering your question. And I'm going to hear about it, but I'm going to answer your question anyway. There's ongoing conversation about how to help the city overcome its challenges, how the state can work with the city on a variety of issues. You talk about pensions, we talk about issues around combating violence in the city, job creation. These are all things that are ongoing dialogues between my staff and her staff, and directly between the mayor and me. And I, as an economic engine, the biggest economic engine for the state of Illinois, it's very important that the governor and the mayor get along and work well together, and we're doing that. So thank you. I think that's way beyond what my press said. Thank you very much. We'll talk later, I'm sure. Yeah.